Hello, welcome to Cherokee Now. Today we have Lucky Hodges joining the show. Lucky is the mental health therapist for Heart to Heart Child Advocacy here in Cherokee. Lucky, welcome to the show. Tell me a little bit about your program and what you do as a mental health therapist.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I am the mental health therapist at Heart to Heart. The Child Advocacy Center is basically a one-stop shop for children and families to come in and share their stories of abuse. We conduct forensic interviews there, so we get the child's story. We are a part of the investigative team to ensure that the child receives justice for any abuse that they may have suffered. We offer mental health services to the children, the children, and the family. That would be the non-offending, involved caregivers, and the child's siblings.
Absolutely. So what are we here to speak about this month?
Today we're talking about preventing child abuse. April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Okay, and what is child abuse? How do you define it? There are 4 types of it.
Yes, the 4 types of child abuse are physical abuse, sexual, emotional, and neglect.
Okay, and how does the North Carolina statutes define an abused or neglected child?
What I'd like to do is read that verbatim to make sure that I get that completely clear.
Yeah, we have a lot of information. We want to make sure that everybody gets every point that we have to make.
So the North Carolina statute reads, any juvenile less than 18 years of age whose parent, guardian, or caretaker inflicts or allows to be inflicted serious physical injury by other than accidental means, or creates or allows to be created serious risk of injury, or inappropriate behavior modifications, or sexual abuse.
Okay, so what we're talking about is some really heavy stuff, and I want the audience to know that this is a very serious matter. Child abuse happens all across the world, and it's something that happens in our community. Whether or not we want to accept it or turn a blind eye to it, we have a responsibility to the children, but what we're talking about is some really heavy stuff. How do we identify child abuse and neglect?
Child abuse can be defined as a non-accidental injury or a pattern of injuries to the child.
So it's something that somebody has done to a child.
Yeah.
That's child
and
abuse.
oftentimes it is not one incident or one occurrence.
Okay.
Many times there's a pattern of abuse.
Gotcha.
It continues without intervention.
What are some of the signs, and I know this is part of the heavy part of it, of possible physical abuse?
That would be a pattern of bruising, unexplained burns like cigarette burns or glove mark burns.
So it's not a high sign. If a child is ending up with injuries that they didn't do accidentally, or someone has inflicted on them, that's abuse. That's signs that need to be reported.
Absolutely.
What about sexual abuse? What are some of the signs of possible sexual abuse?
Many times the children, particularly young children, seem to have more of a sophisticated view of sexuality, so they often will act out sexual behaviors that are inappropriate for their age.
Okay.
Other signs would be sometimes children are really hyperactive, they're very aggressive, so there are a lot of behavioral kinds of things that we can look out for. On the other end of the spectrum, sometimes kids are very shy or passive or kind of a recluse. They don't interact very well with their peers.
Now, I guess we'll see you'll see components of all of these coming together when it needs to be reported. Not having a shy child doesn't mean we have a person that's being abused, but if we start to see patterns or other pieces of this pie come together, that might be a situation where we might have a conversation with someone like yourself, a therapist, or
right.
Okay. Why, when, and how would someone make a report if they in fact start to see these symptoms or they see these distinguishing factors of people that may be abused?
Okay. Why would be because we're all mandated.
Okay.
Every citizen is required by law to report suspected child abuse. You don't have to know that it's occurring, but if you have reason to believe that the child is being abused in any way, we are mandated again to report. If someone fails to report, they can be charged, and it is a misdemeanor.
Okay. Who should report? Is that
everyone? Anyone.
Everyone.
And by the way, if you do report, your report remains anonymous.
Okay.
You don't have to identify yourself. And if it turns out that you make a report because you suspect child abuse, there are reasons that you are suspicious that something may be going on with the child or the family. If it turns out that there was no child abuse, we investigate and we find that there isn't abuse in the home, then you are not punished in any way. Okay. There's no retaliation if it's done, if the report is made in good faith.
Yeah, okay. So how does one report?
Basically, what you would do is contact your county DSS, that's
Okay.
Swain County or Jackson County, or contact our family safety program here in Cherokee.
If it's happening on the boundary.
That's right.
Do it here in Cherokee. What happens following a report?
The social worker will take the call and they'll ask for information about the child's name, their age, their date of birth, if you have that. As much information as you have on hand is helpful. Also, they'll gather information about the family.
Okay.
They will go to the child's home. They'll visit the child at school. They'll interview with people that are involved with the child.
Right.
And then they'll make a decision in terms of whether or not they have enough evidence that would warrant an investigation.
Okay, I got you. So how might help be provided to the child and family once this happens?
Well, one avenue is to refer the child and the family to Heart Child Advocacy Center.
Okay.
And at the center, again, we provide therapy or counseling. We will make recommendations or referrals to other helping professionals in the community.
Okay.
We make sure that their needs are met. For example, if they have financial difficulties, let's say the offender is the wife's husband.
Okay.
And he may go to jail for a period of time, and he might have been the only breadwinner in the family.
Gotcha.
So we do offer financial services as
Okay.
well.
How can someone show care and concern?
I think the first thing that we need to do is honestly reach out to parents in the community. Offer an opportunity for them to vent their concerns and their frustrations and listen to them non-judgmentally.
Right.
We also can model positive parenting practices. Other things that we can do is if we do suspect abuse or if we see someone being maybe using discipline that seems very inappropriate, rather than glaring at them or saying something to them that's a disapproving kind of response, try to empathize with them and say things like, I know parenting's hard, it's a real challenge. Yeah. So empathize with them and then compliment them for doing the right thing. If you happen to notice a family or a friend who has children and you see that they are practicing positive parenting techniques, absolutely.
As a community, we have a responsibility to reinforce the good in our community because that travels outwardly. It takes itself forward. What are some responses that are not helpful?
It is not helpful to criticize the parent. That sometimes only agitates the family, and they sometimes will take that out on the children. So other things are...
Go to your notes if you need to.
Okay, I do need to go to my
I know,
notes.
and there's a lot of information to be shared with the community, so it's important that we get as much out as we can, as quickly as we can, so everybody can.
Okay,
can get
so...
them. And obviously, you have this stuff available to folks in your office.
I do.
So if at some point we'll get your information out so you can share this if folks have questions or need this pamphlet, they can come by and grab one.
Okay. It's easier to talk about what to do than what not to do.
Not to do.
Because I avoid the things that we aren't supposed to be doing. But here's an example, and this is really important. That is making promises to the child. If a child discloses abuse and you say to them, I'm not going to tell anybody, this is between you and me, that's taboo because you will be making a report.
Right.
So making promises that you won't tell is something that is not at all helpful because then if you do report it, you've broken that trust.
And it may stop at that point.
Another do not do is pushing the child into giving details about the abuse. So we want to just kind of leave it. Listen to what they have to say. Let them know that you are interested in what they have to say. Thank them for telling you. Let them know that they are safe, that you are very proud of them for telling. Asking direct questions can and will harm the interview or the investigation.
Gotcha.
Finally, discussing with other who are not involved in the care of the child or in the investigation can be detrimental to the child's case.
Okay, I got you there. So how can young people, once we've got our adult education and we've got the factors that we should and shouldn't be doing and how we can report issues, how do we educate the children to protect themselves from abuse?
I think one of the things that we need to consider is that we're always, as parents, talking with our children about different types of safety measures, like crossing the street or safety in the pool.
Looking both ways, holding hands in the parking lots.
Exactly. And children typically are not afraid to cross the street or go into the pool because we've talked with them about safety rules. But when it comes to safe touching rules, oftentimes parents are uncomfortable.
Is
It's
it
kind of,
because it's taboo? Is it it's a subject that we just try to veer away from and hope the schools are doing it, or hope that someone else is teaching my children?
Absolutely.
This very important
it can
information.
be awkward, and many times the parents aren't trained
Right.
to talk about these kinds of things with their children. They're not really sure, how do I put this, how do I say this, what
Okay.
words do I use? So basically I came up with like 4 touching rules that a
Okay.
parent can share with their child. So the first one is that we do not, as a family, keep secrets about touching.
Absolutely.
The second one is no one should ever touch your private body parts or the parts of your body that are covered by your bathing suit
Right.
unless they're helping you to remain clean and healthy.
Okay.
The third one is if someone touches you in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable or you're feeling a little confused about that touch, it's really important to teach our children to be assertive
Right.
and say to them no. Learn the word no. Practice the word no.
Right.
And then finally, after you say no or shake your head, then get away from that person. Go. It's no and go. You
Okay.
leave that person and you go and you tell
And you
someone
need to
that you
tell
feel you can
someone
trust.
you can confide in. So, read to me. I know recently that you mentioned that the North Carolina governor had created a proclamation based around child abuse prevention. Can you read that out loud so
I
we
would
can
love
have the
to.
wording? It's a beautiful piece, and I want to make sure that everybody in the community can hear that.
Okay, happy to do that.
Thank you.
So, for Child Abuse Prevention Month, the month of April, the governor of the state of North Carolina wrote a proclamation. And it goes as follows. Whereas our children deserve the best that we have within us and look to us to be their protectors, role models, heroes, and heroines. And whereas children who are loved and nurtured grow up to love and nurture others, they give back to their own families, their neighborhoods, and the entire state the good that was bestowed on them. The cycle continues. And whereas more than 127,000 children are reported as abused and neglected each year in the state of North Carolina, at least 25 children between the July 2015 and July 2016 died due to abuse. The rest live on, but they often carry the burden of their abuse into their adulthood. And whereas child abuse and neglect know no social or economic boundaries, we dedicate our energies to preventing child physical abuse, sexual, emotional abuse, neglect, and their terrible legacy. And whereas preventing child abuse and neglect is the responsibility of every citizen, and community action and involvement are essential to breaking the cycles of abuse. And finally, it is vital that we join together to reach out to parents and children to prevent the senseless abuse and neglect of all children.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I know.
And it is something to live by, and it's something for each community to really take to heart and to enforce.
Right.
Not just to say it out loud, not just to share it with each other, but to really enforce that, to say we are standing up for each of the children of this community because we want all of our children to be in a better place, when they're our age and they have to teach their children. So that's great. So tell me about the theme. I know you created kind of a motto for the month. What is your motto for this month's National Child Abuse Prevention Month?
A happy childhood lasts a lifetime.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
And the piece of that, I guess the philosophy is that the opposite side of that, though, is that an unhappy childhood lasts a lifetime as
Also
well.
lasts a lifetime and
replicates.
beyond.
As the governor had mentioned in his proclamation, it replicates itself. It's a pattern. It's a cycle. We tend to see people that were abused and that were hurt or that had trauma in their childhood grow up to become adults and that do that with their children as
Absolutely.
well. And that's something we need to break. And it's something that if you were an abused child and you're growing up as an adult, if you need the therapy and the help, come forward and help before you create another cycle and prevent that from happening with your own children. So, okay, well, good. Well, Lucky, I really appreciate you coming out today and chatting with me on such a heavy subject. You're the professional in this, and I feel like our community does need to be aware of what's happening. And thank you for making the awareness available today for the month of April each year. Do you have anything else to add before we go?
I would, actually. I would like to talk about some things that community members can do to be involved
Okay.
in child prevention. And the first one that I'd like to review is helping other parents that you know. Give parents a break. So oftentimes we have single parents that many times are overwhelmed with their children and all the other responsibilities. So I think giving them a break, spending some time with their children, give them some time off, watch their children for the afternoon. And also being a listening ear, a non-judgmental listening ear, to give them a chance to kind of vent some of the frustrations that they feel, and modeling positive parenting techniques. Reinforcing those techniques. If you notice again that a parent is performing in a way that you feel is helping to build that child's self-esteem and self-confidence, compliment them. Let them know that you noticed and you appreciate it. There is a number that you can call for some positive parenting techniques. There's also a hotline, and that number is 1-800-354-KIDS, KIDS.
354-KIDS. Okay. Now, how can folks get in touch with you if they need to come from the community here?
The number at Heart to Heart is 359-6313. My direct number is 6317. We're located on Oconee Road in the Ginger Lynn building between enrollment and the library.
Okay. Great. Well, I really appreciate you coming
Thank
today.
you.
And that'll be it for today. If you're listening at home and would like to comment on the show or ask any questions regarding what we've discussed today, please comment on our EBCI Cherokee Now Facebook page at facebook.com/Cherokee Now. We'll see you again soon. David Dagahanyi.